Chapter 51. Alone? Yes. So, you came alone? Yes, that's what I said. Yes. Struggling to understand what was happening, Hwang Jong-gi looked back at the entire situation. Repeating the same words and the same questions in his mind, he awkwardly makes eye contact with his subordinate. Didn't he just say that just now? And then nodded with a slightly awkward face. It seemed like the child did come alone. Hwang Jong-gi turned his head and looked at the child in front of him. He had all sorts of thoughts racing through his mind. Was Mount Hua looking down on the Eunha merchants? Or was there a reason they sent this child? If not... At that moment, a peal of loud laughter was heard approaching from behind. How ridiculous! Young master, didn't I tell you? There is no need to meet with Mount Hua. Ki Mok-sung. He had followed Hwang Jong-gi to the front gate and continued to speak while struggling to stifle his laughter. What were they thinking by sending a little boy for help? They knew nothing but wanted to make use of this opportunity. They were too embarrassed to come in person, so they sent a child instead. Such petty tricks. Hwang Jong-gi's face hardened. It was obvious that Ki Mok-sung disliked Mount Hua just from his words. But now, Hwang Jong-gi was beginning to think the same. Is Elder Hyunjong of Mount Hua a man who would do such a thing? The Hyunjong that he knew was always a gentleman, despite being in trouble. It was unlikely for that man to send in a child alone. But was this a new reality? Young man, did you really come here alone? Yes. You mean that Mount Hua has sent you, a young Taoist, alone? Young Taoist? Chung Myung sighed deeply. To be treated like this because of this young body. There was a time when Chung Myung was Mount Hua and Mount Hua was Chung Myung. I'd rather die than suffer like this. But he could understand the reaction. A child who isn't even a physician comes and says they'll cure diseases that the best doctors in the world fail to treat. So he controlled himself. Young master? Yes. My name is Chung Myung, a third-class disciple of Mount Hua. I received the letter the young master sent to Mount Hua. I have a clue about the symptoms which were written in the letter, so I came to visit. All alone. It was an urgent matter, so I couldn't wait for the others to come. Isn't the elderly in critical condition? That was true. Hwang Jong-gi, who stared at Chung Myung, couldn't bring himself to trust that face. But he recalled a part of Chung Myung's words and hardened his face. You said you have a clue about my father's condition. Yes, that's right. Hwang Jong-gi clenched his fist. This is the first time someone said it outright. So far, so many people had come, but not one person had an idea of what was happening. Maybe. At that moment, he heard a snort from behind. The young child is already misleading you. How can a child know something that the great masters of the world don't? Young master, you can't listen to him any longer. But, young master, do you believe that little brat? Hwang Jong-gi bit his lip. At that moment, Chung Myung, who was listening, spoke out. By the way, who the hell are you to keep referring to me as a brat? Ki Mok-sung looked at Chung Myung with blank eyes. Are you asking me? Is there anyone other than you who used the word brat? You arrogant brat. Does this mean that the disciples of Mount Hua can't even recognize the uniform of the Jungnam sect? I know that Mount Hua isn't doing great, but I didn't think they would be taking such idiotic disciples. Ah, the Jungnam sect. Chung Myung just shrugged his shoulders. Well, you were speaking as if you knew what you were talking about, so I thought you were a physician. So, do you have a cure for Master Hwang's condition? Master Hwang has fallen ill because he went against the Tao. If we can perform the Taoist ritual to relieve the anger of heaven, he will be healed cleanly. Chung Myung smiled at it. Oh, that could be true. Hwang Jong-gi's face contorted at it. But the words which flowed from Chung Myung's mouth were completely different from Hwang Jong-gi's expectations. Then we need to hurry up and call for the Udang sect or the Kunlun sect. What? Isn't this ritual thing what they specialize in? Ki Mok-sung frowned as he spoke with a slightly flustered face. There's no need to go that far. Isn't the Jungnam sect right here? Eh? Everyone knows that both the Jungnam and Mount Hua sects aren't good with rituals. If you're going to do a ritual, it would be better to get a proper expert. If it was me, I would prefer the Udang sect. Hwang Jung-gi's face darkened. Just who is this child? The child then whispered to Hwang Jung-gi, the Wudang sect tends to value trust, so donate a little and they will come to you right away. If you want to do something, then aim for the best quality, from a good place, a place that's cost-effective too. Ki-mok-sung lets out a furious bellow from his anger-flushed face. Shut up! This brat is constantly making fun of adults. Did your elders teach you this? Yeah, sorry. Chung Myung calmly picked his ears. He was blatantly disregarding Ki-mok-sung, but the man could do nothing but tremble in anger. If he was the elder, and he couldn't even bear the anger and lashed out, then it would be a disgrace for the Jungnam sect. Wouldn't that be enough for the people of the world to point their fingers at them? No one could tell if the child was doing this intentionally, but he was adept at pulling on every nerve. Young master, kick this brat out right now. Hwang Jung-gi sighed at those words. Elder, this is the Unha Merchant Guild, not the Jungnam sect. It is up to me to decide how I will treat my guests. Are you still saying that after seeing how this child acts? Hwang Jung-gi ignored Ki-mok-sung and looked at Chung Myung. I want to believe him. If he came here to cheat them, then the child wouldn't be acting so proudly. But there was a bit of suspicion. Young Taoist. Yes. I am not saying this because I don't believe you. It's fine. You can't simply believe someone outright. Thank you for understanding. May I ask a few questions? Hwang Jung-gi asked right away. Chung Myung also felt that it was understandable for the other man to be suspicious. Yes, by all means. Hwang Jung-gi gulped and continued. Young man, you said a while ago that you had some clue about my father's condition. Can I hear a little bit about it? It's a bit hard to say. Afraid that Chung Myung would say something, Ki-mok-sung snorted. Hwang Jung-gi felt embarrassed about the absurdity. Instead, can I ask something? What is it? I heard that Master Hwang often traveled for the sake of business, right? Yes. Then he must have stopped by the Chilin Mountains before growing ill, right? Chung Myung spoke, brimming with confidence. Hwang Jung-gi was taken aback. His eyes opened wide and he looked at Chung Myung and said, No, he didn't. Chung Myung tilted his head slightly. Huh? That never happened. Father had never gone up those mountains. Ah, is that so? Chung Myung seemed flustered and Hwang Jung-gi's expression began to turn gloomy. So Chung Myung hastily said, Then he must have been attacked in the upper parts of the mountains before, right? Did he experience a crisis of some sort? My father hasn't been attacked at all in recent years. At least, not for the past 5 years. Huh? Not that too? Ah, shit. Then what? Hwang Jung-gi narrowed his eyes. Really? That can't be right. Hwang Jung-gi could hear Ki-mok-sung laughing from behind. That's strange. Where did he get beat up? Beat up? This crazy bastard. Was this child even in his right mind? It was at the moment the hope Hwang Jung-gi saw in Chung Myung disappeared. Hwang Jung-gi's eyes turned cold. Chung Myung spoke in a panic. Well, wait, is that true? Well, I can still fix him. Young Taoist. Hwang Jung-gi sighed, and without missing the moment, Ki-mok-sung came in. Didn't I say they were nothing now? Mount Hua was always made of rookies who like to dazzle the other's eyes. Isn't that something you can see from this one's overconfident form? Please refrain from speaking like that, elder. Hwang Jung-gi dissuaded Ki-mok-sung and spoke to Chung Myung. I understand the will of the young Taoist to come and help, but my father is very ill right now, and I don't have the time for this. I hope you can understand my current position too. His entire body turns red as if he's boiling, but his body shivers as though it's cold. When you press his skin with your fingers or hand, the pressed part turns white and then quickly turns red again. Until he lost consciousness, he complained about the cold as if he was in a frozen cave because of the uncontrollable chills. Furthermore, the black spots are not only the glabella, but also on the back of his neck and crown of his head. Should I say more? Chung Myung smirked. Huh, how did you know? Hwang Jung-gi's eyes widened. The face and form of Chung Myung were so confident that he couldn't doubt him anymore. I came from a long way. I'm a little thirsty. What are you waiting for? Get water right now. No, get cold water. Right now. The subordinate didn't even answer and ran inside with all his might. Hwang Jung-gi's gaze and attitude had changed towards Chung Myung. We can't do this here. Please, come inside. A great person has come. Hurry, please. Chung Myung inflated his chest and followed Hwang Jong-gi inside. Kim Mok-seung, who was watching from the side, exclaimed urgently, "Young master, those are typical symptoms for those who suffer from harmful ki. Knowing that doesn't change anything." Hwang Jong-gi narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying that a black ki gathers on the crown and back of the neck of those who have been affected by harmful ki flow? This is a matter of the Eunha Merchant Guild. We will not tolerate any more interference than necessary. If you interfere one more time, I will personally have to take this up to the Jungnam sect." Kim Mok-seung sighed and took a step back. His eyes looked at the child. Chung Myung had puffed up cheeks, clearly trying to hold back his laughter. You, brat. Kim Mok-seung felt heat rising all over his body. He wanted to tear the child apart, but what could he do? As Hwang Jong-gi said, this wasn't the Jungnam sect, but the Eunha Guild. No matter how much of an elder he was, he couldn't act arrogantly here. "You brat, if you cannot treat Master Hwang properly, I will personally strike you down." All he could do was shove Chung Myung and walk away furiously. After a little while, Hwang Jong-gi spoke with a bitter smile. "I am sorry, young Taoist. Strangely, whenever Mount Hua comes up, the Jungnam sect seems to lose all reason." "It's fine." Please understand." "Who's to blame? It was all my sins to begin with." "Huh?" Chung Myung shrugged. "Maybe I shouldn't have beaten them so much." At this moment, the perpetrator from 100 years ago sympathized with the victims 100 years later. Chapter 52. "No, what is it?" "You see, there's a proper order to these things." "Isn't this the most urgent matter?" "I've come from so far away, and I'm hungry." "When the treatment is done, I will prepare a feast." "I have no power to move." "You can sit." Chung Myung glanced at Hwang Jong-gi. His eyes were burning. Hwang Jong-gi finally caught hold of a rope while he was drowning, and that rope was Chung Myung. If he couldn't fix Master Hwang, he wasn't going to let Chung Myung go. Chung Myung lost his appetite. "Then, let's go and take a look." "Hurry." Okay, don't rush me." Chung Myung turned his head and looked at the bed. Lying on the bed was a man covered in a thick silk blanket. "Let's see." Checking the man's face, Chung Myung narrowed his eyes as his forehead creased. It certainly is the symptoms of the demon flower. He would have to take a closer look to be sure. Chung Myung moved closer and removed the blanket. Seeing the scene before him, he frowned subconsciously. Hwang Mun-yak's withered and skinny appearance couldn't be hidden despite the loose clothing on his body. The old man's throat has dried up as each ragged breath he took seemed to walk a tightrope between life and death. The situation is more serious than I thought. Chung Myung rubbed his chin. The demon flower is one thing, but this wasn't done properly. If he had been subjected to a highly trained demonic art, then he wouldn't have lasted a year. Even those who rigorously trained all their lives would be unable to survive for 3 days. These are not symptoms an elderly man could endure. Then, I'm going to check his pulse. Yes. Chung Myung reached out and grabbed Master Hwang's wrist. He then inserted a little bit of ki. As Chung Myung's pure ki left his body and entered Master Hwang through his wrist, the blackened veins and red tint on his skin began to retreat. This. Chung Myung frowned. The symptoms were clearly that of the demon flower. However, they were awkward symptoms that would never come from properly trained demonic sect members. Chung Myung released the old man's hand and touched his chin as if he was in trouble. Hwang Jong-gi couldn't hide his nervousness as he saw Chung Myung's strained expression looking like that. Anyone would struggle to remain calm if their last hope showed such a serious reaction when examining a patient. Finally, unable to bear it, Hwang Jong-gi opened his mouth. How is it? So... Chung Myung scratched the back of his head. Is it tough? Nah, I don't think that treating it would be difficult. Right, it's fine. Everyone has been... Huh? Hwang Jong-gi's body trembled. What was that? Treating this shouldn't be too difficult. Really? Are you sure? Yes, but I can't rush into it right away. Some preparations will need to be done. Preparations like... First of all, Chung Myung had a sly smile. Let's eat. Chung Myung was cutting and chewing everything around him to shreds. Hwang Jong-gi was aghast at the absurd sight unfolding before him. He had met many Taoists in his life while building relationships with others, but this was the first time he had seen a Taoist so obsessed with eating meat. Even now, the long torn legs of the duck which entered Chung Myung's mouth re-emerged as a desiccated bone robbed of all its flesh. Not just that. As soon as the glass was filled, expensive Yonte liquor disappeared down his throat. Yeah, this is it. This is the life. It was the first time Chung Myung had tasted such delicious alcohol. Hwang Jong-gi would have normally laughed, saying that he'd met an interesting person today, but the current situation kept him from enjoying himself. That young Taoist. Eh? What? Chung Myung asked, with meat filling his mouth. Hwang Jong-gi, taking a deep breath to calm himself, continued. The preparations. When will they be done? I'm preparing now. What do you mean? It's nothing serious. Chung Myung put down his chopsticks. The treatment requires a lot of stamina, so it is important to be well fed. Plus, the chef here is really great. Obviously he is, because the chef was the best in Xi'an. I only got to eat small meals and rice in Mount Hua. This is so good. Chung Myung patted his stomach. Are you done? No, this is just the beginning. Was there a tapeworm in his stomach? It was said that Mount Hua was going through difficult times, but this one seemed too hungry. No, even if he was starving, wouldn't his stomach get full after a while? Surely, there must be a limit to what a human stomach can hold. This was a Taoist who surprised people in many ways. You didn't come here just to eat, right? What are you saying? Well, Taoists are people who move with a purpose. Those who cultivate the way of Tao live according to the flow. Well, the flow here is too fast. This is a moderated flow. What? Hwang Jong-gi sighed, knowing he couldn't win over this child. Young man, I understand that it's rude to rush you when you're here to help us, especially after a long journey. But shouldn't you also consider the feelings of a son whose father has been bedridden for over a year? I'm already considering it. Hwang Jong-gi jumped out of his seat. Look here, young one. My father isn't dying. What did you say? He isn't dying, so sit down. Chung Myung casually poured another glass of alcohol and drank it down. Seeing Hwang Jong-gi's angry and confused expression, Chung Myung decided to speak. I've already taken some measures to ensure he won't die, so there's no problem. It will take some time to cure him completely, but we've already overcome the first important hurdle. He's been treated. When? There is a saying that the faster we move ahead, the more we need to think back. Healing your father now is not that important. What's really important is to understand why he fell ill in the first place. You really treated him. Did you think I was scamming you? Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders and continued. If you have any doubts, go and check. I'm sure the dark key on his forehead will have dissipated by now. Hwang Jong-gi stared intently at Chung Myung and nodded his head. I do not doubt you. However, I think it's good to be certain, so I will check right away. Please, go ahead. Hwang Jong-gi quickly went outside. A short while later, he burst through the door, slamming it open as he stared at Chung Myung with incredulous eyes. What did you do? I treated him. When? Chung Myung didn't reply and casually pointed to the seat opposite him. Aren't you going to sit? Hwang Jong-gi looked at Chung Myung suspiciously. While living as a merchant, he'd met an uncountable number of people, but this was his first time meeting such a person. He'd met many children, but this child seemed more like a seasoned old man. It's as if an old man's soul resided within a child's body. That's impossible. Instead, this child must have experienced countless events unsuited for his age. Otherwise, it was unlikely for a child to handle such situations with ease. Can I trust him? But there is no reason to not believe. As he confirmed, his father did show signs of recovery. Whether or not he knew what Hwang Jong-gi was thinking, Chung Myung continued to pour another glass of liquor and spoke. If you don't want to sit, then stand and answer. I have a few questions for you. Hwang Jung-gi sat down. Who is the person closest to your father? Closest? Yes, a person who guards Master Hwang, a person who follows him dawn till dusk. Otherwise, someone well trusted, the last person to be suspected of anything untoward. Why are you asking that? Let's just say that it'll be necessary for the treatment. Hwang Jung-gi tilted his head. Of course it's me. It is my job to serve my father. Except you. Except me. Hwang Jung-gi, who thought deeply, shook his head. I don't know. Father was a man who worked a lot, so of course, several people were around him or looked after him. There are at least 5 people who meet your standards and often stay around him. A lot more than I thought. Chung Myung scratched his cheek, but then shrugged his shoulders and smiled. If there are 5 of them, finding out which one it is won't be easy. Finding out what? Are you really asking because you can't understand? No, right? Hwang Jung-gi's face went stiff. He didn't ask because he was unaware of the truth. It was because he didn't want to admit it. You mean, someone did this from inside? At first, I thought it was from outside, but looking at Master Hwang, I don't think that was the case. From my point of view, this was a betrayal from the inside. Hwang Jung-gi's face went stiff. Please refrain from such words, young Taoist. All members of the Eunha merchants are like family. They have been together with us their entire lives, and they all respect my father. They, or not. Chung Myung patted his full stomach. If we suspect them and they're truly innocent, then it'll all be fine anyway, right? That is true. Chung Myung yawned. So don't worry, we'll investigate and find out. Hwang Jung-gi just nodded his head. Seeing that, Chung Myung clicked his tongue and thought, he's pretty naive for a merchant. Chung Myung knew just how poisonous humans can be. He had seen monks who preached mercy, given to rage and go mad, and watched innocent Taoists who plot the most efficient way to slit a person's throat. Human beings are two-sided. You can be an angel to someone and the devil to another. Well, that's besides the point. The important thing was that a person wanted to kill Hwang Mun-yak. Judging from his condition, the culprit clearly has poor comprehension of the demon sect's technique. The problem was that, even though it couldn't do much damage to Hwang Mun-yak at first, over time and prolonged exposure, he became gravely afflicted. Even if someone had knowledge of the demon flower, they wouldn't be able to tell how the symptoms originated unless they had seen it with their own eyes like Chung Myung. The culprit must be well hidden. Luck was on his side. If Chung Myung had never seen the contents of that letter, no, if he hadn't even heard of this Master Hwang earlier that day, then Hwang Mun-yak would have been destined to die. This is a good deed. Save people and make money. How do you plan on investigating? I'm already doing it. Hwang Jung-gi asked with a blank face. You are doing it? Yes. You're eating food, but you're saying you are investigating? Not that. It's the fact that I am in the room with the young master is enough for the investigation. Hwang Jung-gi couldn't figure it out. Just watch. Soon, a lot of fun things will happen. Young master, be sure to keep your eyes open. There's one more thing you need to do. What is it? I'll try my best. Chung Myung picked up the bottle next to him. One more bottle. Quickly. A flood of tears was concealed within Hwang Jung-gi's heart. Chapter 53. Ki Mok-seung stared at the food in front of him with an agitated expression. Holding his chopsticks, he eventually set them down, unable to eat. The disciples who were there stole furtive glances at him. Is the food not to your liking? It isn't that the food is poor. I just don't feel well. You don't feel well? If the disciples have done anything wrong, please punish us. It isn't your fault. Ki Mok-seung gently pushed the table away with an irritated face. There's a man I never wanted to see, and someone sharing the same name as him is currently running around. The second-class disciple, Lee Song-baek, asked, Are you talking about the Mount Hua disciple? Ki Mok-seung didn't answer, but everyone knew what this uncomfortable cough meant. Elder, I don't quite understand. What could one small child even do? Whether or not he's a child isn't the problem. Then, it's a problem that he's a child from Mount Hua. The disciple didn't seem to understand. What did it mean that a child from Mount Hua is the problem? They could never comprehend why their superiors held such hostility for Mount Hua. Didn't your sister tell you, our two sects cannot live under the same sky? Kim Ok-sung was different from these disciples. He grew up listening to countless stories of Mount Hua, how much Mount Hua had made the Jungnam sect suffer, and how they arduously struggled to survive while Mount Hua was thriving. It's disgusting enough that Mount Hua's disciple dared to confidently stroll into Xi'an, but he even shares the same name as the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, which I hate the most. The disciples exchanged glances between themselves. So it's because of that. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint died over 100 years ago, but he's still spoken of here. Mount Hua's disciples don't even remember the name of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, but it seems like we hear his name more than our own ancestors. The Plum Blossom Sword. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint, Chung Myung. People of the Jungnam sect do not add the word respected while talking about Chung Myung. They would never put such a noble word on that man. Lee Song-baek looked at the elder. Anyone could tell that his elder's obsession was abnormal, but even so, Kim Ok-sung was the elder and their mentor. Normally, their elder was very kind and gentle, at least if no stories of Mount Hua came up. Please don't let it bother you. Are you telling me not to worry about it? Kim Ok-sung's eyebrows rose. That child is now going around the city saying that he can cure Master Huang. As if that's possible. His condition is improving. Lee Song-baek shut his mouth. Kim Ok-sung did not say anything more, but the intelligent Lee Song-baek understood what was meant. What if that child really cured Master Huang? It would be a mess. Master Huang is a man with a strict moral code and great values. There was no way that Master Huang would fail to repay the favor to Mount Hua, which saved his life. Obviously, that meant that they would do their best to support Mount Hua, both physically and internally too. We have to stop him. Lee Song-baek, who quickly racked his brain, coughed slightly as he opened his mouth. Elder, if that child bothers you, why not just drive him out? Are you going to do it? Kim Ok-sung asked with wide eyes. Yes, it would be shameful if the elder went in person, but aren't we simple second-class disciples? What's so wrong with the second-class disciples of the Jungnam sect sparring with the third-class disciples of Mount Hua? Well, won't people spread rumors of us persecuting a child? Lee Song-baek smiled brightly. Who doesn't know of Mount Hua and Jungnam sect's rivalry? It's not unusual for either side to be a bit heavy-handed when encountering one another. Kim Ok-sung nodded his head. Besides, the Jungnam and Mount Hua conference is coming up soon, so it can serve as a justification for requesting a spar. I understand what you mean, but I cannot allow it. Kim Ok-sung spoke firmly. He is still only a third-class disciple. Targeting a child will only serve to lower our sect's privilege. How would the rest of the world see it if one of the great sects persecuted a child from a dying sect on the edge of collapse? Lee Song-baek kept silent. The one who was worried about the child being here was Kim Ok-sung. Despite this, it would be difficult to bear any charges should he be implicated in any damage to this young disciple. So, he had to speak in his defense. However, as a disciple, there is always a way to understand the heart of one's elders. Then, I understand that you will not allow any of your disciples to act against that child, but if one of your disciples make a mistake, it would be fine as long as they are properly punished. Of course, I will punish anyone who touches the child. I'll keep that in mind. Kim Ok-sung is a man of his words, so it was true that there would be punishment, and it would be severe too. But after the punishment, there would be an even greater reward. A disciple must follow the words of their mentor, but isn't it also the duty of a disciple to relieve the mentor's mind? We will take care of it, so please don't worry. I'll do that. Yes, Elder. I'll take my leave now. When Kim Mok-sung nodded without answering, the disciples took a deep bow and left the room. Kim Mok-sung looked at the scene and frowned. These kids looked down on Mount Hua. But he could understand it. By the time these kids were born, Mount Hua had already fallen. In their minds, Mount Hua was just an old sect with a glorious past. But Kim Mok-sung knew just how strong Mount Hua was in the past. Although the Jungnam sect is influential now, it was hardly spoken of when Kim Mok-sung was a child. As a child, he saw how inferior his sect was. In the past, the Jungnam sect could barely stand compared to Mount Hua. If Mount Hua hadn't been destroyed by the remnants of the demonic sect, the Jungnam sect would never have risen to shine. We must never go back to those days. Kim Mok-sung had a determined face. Seeing how that child left Mount Hua and traveled this far, it's safe to assume that Mount Hua has begun to change and spread its wings once more. He thought he trampled the sect enough for it to never stand up again, but it seems like he took Mount Hua too lightly. I think I'll need to speak with the sect leader once this mess is over. There was brutality in Kim Mok-sung's eyes. Isn't the elder overly sensitive, Sa-hyung? He's always like that whenever Mount Hua's name comes up. Even so, to be wary of a small child, even though Mount Hua once stood at the peak of the world, isn't that simply a dying legend now? They've already collapsed and begun to fade away. That's true. Even if Mount Hua does return to its former glory, it won't be able to be on the same level as us. Lee Song-baek smiled. I like that spirit, but I also agree with the elder. The Mount Hua of the past is by no means easy prey to handle. Even the Jungnam sect in that era was unable to stand up to it. Sa-hyung! Still, the past is the past. In the end, only the strongest survive. He nodded. Go-hee, the saje of Lee Song-baek and second-class disciple, asked, But Sa-hyung, what are you going to do with that child? Shouldn't we at least send him away? Lee Song-baek said. It was against Lee Song-baek's disposition to target a child, but it was a problem to let the child stay when his presence made the elder uncomfortable. There was no need for Kim Mok-sung to touch the child himself. It would be inappropriate for an elder to persecute a child. But what was Mount Hua thinking by sending in a child alone? If it was our sect, they would have never allowed a child to go outside the gates at all. The situation of each sect is unique. Couldn't there be some reason? For sure. Mount Hua doesn't seem to be in good condition. How can we know the state of another sect? Lee Song-baek said and continued. We only need to focus on the task at hand. Don't forget, what we need to do now is take care of the issue causing our elders headaches. Yes, Sa-hyung. Keep it in mind. Lee Song-baek nodded and thought. Now, how do we summon that child? Wait, Sa-hyung! Over there! Huh? At those words, the disciples all turned their heads to one side. Isn't he the one? Is that right? Is he coming this way? Lee Song-baek smiled. He was thinking of how he could call the child here, but he was coming to them with his own 2 feet. So, should we do this right away? There's no need to waste time. Lee Song-baek took a step ahead and approached Chung Myung. Hello, how are you? Huh? Chung Myung tilted his head when he saw Lee Song-baek and the others. Before he could even open his mouth to respond, Lee Song-baek spoke. I am Lee Song-baek of the Jungnam sect. It is a pleasure to meet a disciple of Mount Hua. Ah, yes. Hello, Chung Myung replied. Lee Song-baek patiently smiled. Where are you going? I'm going to see Master Hwang. I'm checking on his condition. Ah, I see. Lee Song-baek smiled. This shameless child. Even Kim Mok-sung couldn't help Master Hwang at all, so he didn't think that this child could do anything. Yet, he brazenly said that he was here for Master Hwang as if he could treat him. If you aren't busy, would you care for a chat? Yes, well, okay. About what? Nothing much. Haven't Mount Hua and the Jungnam sect developed over time by sparring with each other since ancient times? Even now, there is an event where the 2 sects spar with swords and exchange techniques. Do you know about it? Ah, is that so? I didn't know. It hasn't been long since I entered Mount Hua. I thought so. Lee Songbek smiled. If he'd known about our reputation, then he would never raise his head and act so confidently in front of me. Even though the name of the Jungnam sect had come out, this child's expression hadn't changed. No other sect disciples would remain so calm. Experiencing Mount Hua's swordplay would be a great help to our training. What do you say? Won't you give me insight into Mount Hua's swordsmanship? Lee Songbek smiled. He was sure to be refused, but he had other tricks up his sleeve to push him. Oh, I see. Chung Myung nodded before tilting his head. So you want to fight? Lee Songbek cleared his voice. I wasn't asking for a fight, but spar. That's what fighting is. Lee Songbek's eyes went blank. What is with this child? Seeing that expression, Chung Myung smiled. I'm fine with a fight anytime, just don't regret it. A humble declaration. Chapter 54. Lee Songbek frowned. Regret? Did he just say regret? What a fearless child. Usually, Lee Songbek wasn't the sort of man to judge someone based on their age or status, but this young kid from Mount Hua seemed too self-indulgent. No matter how good he isn't even old enough to understand just how significant the difference between his sect and the other sects is. Yet he is out here speaking such things. How could he hold his head high and say such shameless statements, knowing that his sect was at the bottom? Let's stay strong. Lee Songbek sighed and continued. You're saying you agreed to spar? Yes. A blunt but calm answer. Lee Songbek opened his mouth and asked, What is your Taoist name? Don't have one. I'm Chung Myung. Chung Myung. Chung Myung it is. He already knew it, but he still asked for his name. Look here, disciple Chung Myung. I'll give you a piece of advice. You may think that nothing is wrong with what you're doing, but the world's affairs aren't determined solely by one person. I suggest you return to Mount Hua. Aren't we going to fight? Lee Songbek flinched. Chung Myung yawned as if he was bored and then said, It seems like the Jungnam sect fight with their mouths. Why did you say you wanted to fight, only to waste my time talking? Lee Songbek smiled. My discipline is lacking. Feeling that his desire to destroy that wretched bastard soar. There's no need to rush. We will start now. As Lee Songbek grabbed his sword, Go-hee gently grabbed his sleeve. Sa-young, you intend to do this yourself? Lee Songbek looked back at him. You don't have to do it, Sa-young. I'll do it. No. Sa-young. Lee Songbek answered with firm eyes. There is minimum courtesy we must show to the opponent. I am the most mature of us here, so fighting against me wouldn't be too shameful for that child. In the end, Go-hee sighed and stepped back. Anyway, Sa-young is too much. He was in a position to become a great disciple of the sect. The Jungnam sect's Lee Songbek wants to spar with Mount Hua's Chung Myung. Ah, wait a minute. What now? Chung Myung tilted his head as he looked at Go-hee and said, Lend me your sword. Go-hee's eyes widened. Borrow my sword? How could a disciple from a once prestigious sect be like this? When entering a sect that teaches swordsmanship, the first thing one learns is to never let another person lay hands on their sword. Are you saying that disciples of your sect don't even carry their own sword? Well, I'm sorry for not expecting a fight. Mount Hua is— Don't bother if you don't want to. Chung Myung turned around. I'll check and see if there's anything like a stick worth using instead of a sword. Lee Songbek frowned. Lend him your sword. Sa-young! Do you want people to say that disciples of the Jungnam sect fought a disciple of Mount Hua when he didn't even have a proper sword? Go-hee sighed deeply at Lee Songbek's words. Soon after, he took off the sword tied to his waist before throwing it to Chung Myung. Thanks! Chung Myung took the sword, held it in one hand, and looked at Lee Songbek. Let's get started, shall we? Won't you unsheath it? I'm not planning on killing you or anything. It'll stay like this. You can unsheath yours if you want to, though. Lee Songbek closed his eyes. Shit. The more he talked to this kid, the more it felt like all his years' worth of mental training was disappearing. Lee Songbek closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and raised his sword. Initially, he planned to just scare him off, but now, he thought it wouldn't be enough. Aside from his personal feelings, judging from the way he talks and the way he acts, He won't understand until he's broken apart. Lee Sung-baek, who judged Chung Myung's character through the short conversation, was ready. Don't let your guard down. Yeah. Chung Myung lifted the sheathed sword. Seeing that, Lee Sung-baek frowned. You had better do it right. My hands are strong and fast. It will be too late to regret after you've been struck. Excuse me? Chung Myung sighed deeply and said, Hurry up, will you? What are we still standing around for? Come at me. You! Anger deeply covered Lee Sung-baek's face. I'll change that attitude of yours. In the end, he threw away all the manners a Taoist had to have and flew towards Chung Myung. Pop! The clear and simple sword of the Jungnam sect. Among the 10 sects, each sect was famous for their swordsmanship or their Taoism with distinct characteristics of their own. The Wudang sect's sword is known to be soft, Mount Hua is splendid, and the sword of the Jungnam sect was serious. A heavy sword, excluding all changes and tricks, very much like the past, struck towards Chung Myung's neck. Chung Myung slightly raised his sword and blocked the attack. Kang! The blade and sheathed blade collided, producing a sharp metallic sound. Ta! Lee Sung-baek swung his sword again, this time aiming for Chung Myung's flank. Fast and strong. Even if there was time for a counterattack, no one would have the courage to, due to the sword's immense force, which desired to split his waist in half. Kang! And again, Chung Myung lowered his sword to block the attack. He hesitated. Chung Myung, who couldn't handle the weight of the heavy sword, took a step back. Lee Sung-baek noticed this slight hesitation and swung his sword to drive Chung Myung further into a corner. Whoa! Go-hee, who was watching the match, smiled leisurely. Sa-hyung seems quite angry. He doesn't seem to want to end this. Huh, that kid just kept saying whatever you wanted and ended up pissing off Sa-hyung. You really need to judge who you can and can't afford to offend. Huh? Is Sa-hyung scolding that child now? Ah, yes. He can finish this match whenever he wants to, but can't you see that he's trying to hold back? I'm sure that kid must feel like shit right now, just trying to survive Sa-hyung's onslaught. As said, Chung Myung was constantly moving back and forth. Looking at the sight unfolding in front of them, Wei Hansu tilted his head. Doesn't it seem like he's blocking a little too well though? That's the great thing about Sa-hyung. What would people say if Sa-hyung took down a child in an instant? Ah. He quickly grasped the child's limitations and pushed him with enough strength and speed to just barely continue blocking it. He doesn't even need to hit him to teach him a lesson. Go-hee looked proud while saying that. Honestly, he doesn't need to go to such lengths to educate that kid. The kid should be thankful for his lesson. You too, stop doubting Sa-hyung. Yes. Go-hee clicked his tongue. It's hard to believe that someone as gentle as Sa-hyung has gotten so angry. Well, anyone would be angry at that child's attitude. I just hope Sa-hyung doesn't get too excited. However, despite the thoughtful appreciation of the crowd, Lee Sung-baek, who was attacking, was giving it his all to beat Chung Myung. Kang! Blocked again? It was strange. It shouldn't have been blocked. Contrary to what Go-hee was saying about controlling his speed and strength, Lee Sung-baek was constantly accelerating. Why am I being blocked? Chung Myung's sword wasn't fast. It wasn't slow, but also not fast enough to make the opponent wary. However, even with that, he could block Lee Sung-baek's sword. That slow sword seemed to preemptively arrive and patiently await where Lee Sung-baek would strike. I haven't even thought about where I'm going to strike, but he's already there. What the hell is going on here? Could he read sword movement? No, he wasn't at that level. There was no way a young disciple of Mount Hua could read swords, and even if he could, it would be impossible to do it in action. To block his sword with that slow movement, it was as if he could read minds. No, even before Lee Sung-baek decided on a path, that kid was moving his sword. How could such a thing be possible? Was he a ghost? Ah! Lee Sung-baek groaned as he swung his sword. No matter how much he looked at the child, he judged that he couldn't be any older than 15 years old. Considering his age, he should be around his younger brother's age. However, such a child blocked Lee Sung-baek's sword without any difficulty. His sword was one of the most renowned within the Jungnam sect. Impossible. Lee Sung-baek's sword began to shine with ki. Clearly, the spar began with only a little strength, but now He had unknowingly induced internal ki as his strength rapidly rose. Swish! A strong gale gushed out from the sword. Kang! Lee Song-baek's sword, which was lightly surrounded by internal ki, couldn't push away Chung Myung's sword. A wall. It seemed like a wall. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get through it. It felt like a wall made of hard steel. Lee Song-baek swung his sword as hard as he could. Seeing the wind fluttering around Lee Song-baek's sword, Go-hee screamed. "Sa-young, don't overdo it!" Go-hee's shrill voice echoed clearly in Lee Song-baek's ears. "Ah, what do I do?" Lee Song-baek quickly called back his ki. The heavy internal energy dispersed from the blade as the momentum lowered, and what he swung was a barren sword that was merely a bit faster than normal. However, Kwang! There was an explosion from out of the blue as Chung Myung's body shot back like an arrow in flight. Huh? He was stuck to the wall. There were cracks spread like spiderwebs along the wall that Chung Myung struck. His body slowly slid down before settling on the floor. Lee Song-baek was in shock. "Sa-young!" Go-hee ran to him in panic. "What did you do?" No, Obviously, he recalled his ki from the final strike. Even with all his might, he couldn't cause a scratch on Chung Myung. It made no sense for the child to be pushed back so much without the sword even striking him. It was then Chung Myung, who collapsed on the floor, convulsed, and suddenly began to spurt blood from his mouth like a fountain. Everyone was frightened and ran to Chung Myung. Only one person, Lee Song-baek, stood rooted in place as the color drained from his face. Blood soared like a fountain rushing out. Wow, who could imagine that blood could spurt out of a person's mouth like that? Anyone with eyes would believe that Lee Song-baek was at fault for this. "Sa-young!" Lee Song-baek couldn't understand what was happening. Chung Myung's mouth was dripping with blood. He clearly appeared to be injured severely. It wouldn't be too strange even if he flopped over and drew his last breath. Just when Lee Song-baek managed to regain his senses and was about to run to Chung Myung. What the hell is going on here? Everyone's eyes turned to the voice. Lee Song-baek had no choice but to tightly close his eyes with a grim expression. With a face full of anger that he had never seen before, Hwang Jong-gi was glaring at him. Chapter 55. I asked you, what the hell is happening? Hwang Jong-gi's voice rang out loudly. Confused and panicked, the disciples of the Jungnam sect didn't say anything and stared blankly at Hwang Jong-gi. What could they say? Right now, what they needed most was an excuse. But the blood pouring from Chung Myung's mouth would render any excuse invalid. In this hopeless situation, not even the grandfather of Zhuge Liang's grandfather could find a suitable excuse to help them escape. Hwang Jong-gi looked at Chung Myung lying on the floor and cried out, "Hurry! Bring a physician right now. There must be a member of the outer house who hasn't left yet. What are you doing?" "Yes, young master." One of the servants following Hwang Jong-gi rushed to the outer garden. Hwang Jong-gi strode closer to Chung Myung, who was down. The disciples of the Jungnam sect hesitated as they opened a path for him. Hwang Jong-gi knelt down and examined Chung Myung's condition. Anger violently surged in his heart as his face distorted in rage. "You people dare to be righteous?" At Hwang Jong-gi's words, the faces of the Jungnam sect disciples darkened. "Are you saying that this is how one should act against a child? I thought the Jungnam sect would be dignified at least. But how am I supposed to understand what just happened in front of my eyes?" Lee Song-baek's face turned pale. Would he be able to make it out of this alive? He never intended to hurt him like that. I even called back the internal ki. Lee Song-baek was standing still without a word. But one thing was certain. Hwang Jong-gi's expression left no room for excuses. The servant came running back with a physician in tow at the moment. As soon as the physician approached the wheezing Chung Myung, his face stiffened. With a stiff face, he spoke. "Hurry and move him inside. Come on. His insides are a total mess, so be careful. Careful, I said." The Jungnam sect disciples tried to assist them upon hearing that. Stand back! Hwang Jung-gi wouldn't allow them to touch Chung Myung's body. Hwang Jung-gi stared at them with blazing red eyes and called for his servants. What are you doing? Did you not hear my words? Sorry, young master. The servants carefully embraced Chung Myung. Blood gushing from his mouth dripped down to his chest and settled on the floor. Careful, careful! The physician clung tightly to Chung Myung and headed to the main house. Hwang Jung-gi and the other disciples watched as Chung Myung was moved. As the fading figure of Chung Myung finally disappeared, Hwang Jung-gi turned his head. I will never forget what happened today. Young master! Leave! Lee Song-baek's face turned pale. The Eunha Merchant Guild was necessary for the Jungnam sect. Wasn't that why even their elders came down here? If their relationship was now in trouble, the aftermath wasn't something the sect could afford. As Lee Song-baek was about to say something, a voice came from behind. What is all this? It was Ki Mok-sung. He approached with a puzzled look in his eyes. Young master, what is all this? Is that blood? Ki Mok-sung, who was speaking, went silent. The floor and the wall were broken, and he could guess what had happened. These stupid bastards. Ki Mok-sung's gaze fell on his disciples. He sighed after seeing Lee Song-baek, who couldn't even meet his gaze. Young master, if some accident has happened, Are you calling this an accident? Young master, the person who was here to treat my father was horrifyingly injured by your disciples. Can you call this an accident? An accident is something which happens unintentionally. Am I wrong? Ki Mok-sung looked at Lee Song-baek. His look conveyed a deeper meaning to Lee Song-baek. Since he was the one who caused this, he should settle the matter himself. Lee Song-baek, who understood, bit his lip and stepped forward. Young master, there seems to be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Hwang Jung-gi exhaled in anger. It would be better that you call me blind. I saw with my own eyes and heard with my ears. So what could I have misunderstood? I never used so much force against him. There is something— Look here! Hwang Jung-gi stared at Lee Song-baek with cold sunken eyes. Do you think that overextending your hand is the problem here? Why did you, a disciple of the Jungnam sect, have to wield your sword against a child from Mount Hua in the first place? It was a simple spar. Spar? Hwang Jung-gi shook his head. I might not be familiar with the ways of warriors, but I know that spars are done between those who hold equal levels of strength. You say that you were sparring when you went against a child that was barely half your age? No one said anything. If the spar was ended without accident, there wouldn't have been anything to say. However, with it resulting in an injured and bleeding child, there was no talking their way out of taking responsibility. I won't say much. Take your disciples and leave. Young master, listen to my— I said to leave. Hwang Jung-gi looked at Ki Mok-sung and said, I won't press the issue farther out of the respect for the relationship we've shared with the Jungnam sect for so long. But now, I don't want to see the faces of your disciples here. Please leave this place for today. In the end, Ki Mok-sung just slowly nodded his head, unable to speak up. I will. Young master, this was an unfortunate accident, but please remember that the Jungnam sect hopes for Master Hwang's swift recovery. I wish that to be the case, but it doesn't seem like that anymore. Hwang Jung-gi returned towards the main house. Ki Mok-sung, who observed Hwang Jung-gi's departure, turned his head to glare at Lee Song-baek. Elder, I won't say much. This is your fault. You deal with it. Go and ask for the young master's forgiveness at any cost. Solve the situation, and then return. I will first return to the mountain with the others. Lee Song-baek's face turned pale. How could he possibly ask for the forgiveness from the young master in this situation? This was more like a punishment than an order. But looking at the frigid expression on Ki Mok-sung's face, he could only stay quiet and comply. I understand. Ki Mok-sung looked at Lee Song-baek for a long time without speaking, and then turned around. We're leaving. Yes, elder. The disciples all looked at Lee Song-baek and then followed after the elder. Watching them leave, Lee Song-baek bit his lip in frustration. How is his condition? It's not so good. Hwang Jung-gi's face darkened when he received the physician's diagnosis from the general head. Seeing his bleak expression, the general continued. According to the physician, his key meridians are completely strained and in a dangerous situation. For now, they are trying to control the key, but they can't guarantee a complete victory. Does that mean he won't die? It seems like it. Thank goodness. Hwang Jung-gi sighed in relief. Mount Hua's disciple came to the Eunha Merchant Guild to help and was beaten to death by the Jungnam sect. This was something he hated to even think about. Moreover, Chung Myung had come to treat his father. Of course, the fault lay in those who assaulted him, but even the Eunha Merchant Guild would be ridiculed for allowing it to occur at all. For Hwang Jung-gi, personally, this was intolerable. Chung Myung was the only person who managed to improve his father's condition so far. Maybe he was the only hope at ever having his father back. Attacking such an important person and injuring him so, this would have never happened if the Jungnam sect had even a modicum of respect for his father and the guild. That Jungnam sect has become so arrogant. Normally, he would have tried to see both sides of the situation, but when he thought about their attitude and Ki Mok-sung's words, it was difficult to trust them any longer. Hwang Jung-gi coughed several times in discomfort and looked at the general. Then, how long will it take for him to awaken? He should be up in 2 or 3 days. In the meantime, I only pray my father's condition doesn't worsen. Hwang Jung-gi let out a deep sigh. He thought he had finally found a way to help his father, but this had to happen. It seemed like the heavens had turned their backs on him. The general head, who glanced at Hwang Jung-gi's expression, carefully spoke. But young master, will this child really be able to cure the elder? I'm not that confident in him. Is there anything else we lose by believing him? That is true, but Hwang Jung-gi spoke firmly. Of the many people we called for, none have been able to figure out father's disease. But this child from Mount Hua could list the symptoms without even looking at my father. Didn't my father's condition improve a little too? Yes, this isn't some vague belief that I have in him. I feel like heaven is trying to help us a little. Anyway, we just have to ensure that this small child recovers properly. Don't hold back on supporting him. I'll keep that in mind. Then, I'll take my leave for now. Sure. The general head bowed and got up from his seat. Hwang Jung-gi, who watched him leave, let out a low sigh. A low, feeble breath escaped from the corner of Chung Myung's bedridden mouth. His face was pale and tired, seemingly devoid of blood, which showed how precarious his condition was. It was slow and quiet, with no constant rhythm, but it continued nonetheless. However, it wouldn't be strange if he stopped breathing entirely. Only the short and weak breathing filled the room when a strange silence followed. Click. The door opened with a slight sound. And then, nothing happened for a while. Did a few minutes pass? Key. The door began to open carefully. Before long, a man carefully snuck his way in. A cautious movement, not even letting his footsteps make a sound. The room was blanketed in total darkness, leaving it impossible to recognize who had entered. The man snuck in like a cat hunting for food as he came to Chung Myung's side. The sight of Chung Myung breathing weakly with a pale face caught the eye of the silent intruder. The mysterious figure staring at Chung Myung's face slowly raised his hand. Their fingertips were dyed an eerie black as if coated in ink. I have no grudges against you. Just think of this as the price for disturbing my work. The man mumbled to himself, then slammed a blackened hand towards Chung Myung's neck. At that moment, grab. Chung Myung, who should have been exhausted and tired, suddenly pushed aside the blanket and grabbed the man's wrist. Ugh! Chung Myung looked at the man with a tired complexion, a strange smile on his face, the most wicked and triumphant kind. I got you, you son of a bitch. Chapter 56. I got you, you son of a bitch. Chung Myung smiled as he got up. The man tried to retrieve his wrist from Chung Myung's grasp, but was unable to free himself from the firm grip. "You!" The man quickly raised his other hand to strike Chung Myung, but at that moment, the door burst open wide and the room lit up. It was Hwang Jong-gi. Tuck, tuck, tuck. He walked in with a very stiff face and spoke with a heavy voice. "What are you doing here, General Manager?" Audiobook, the general head of the Eunha branch, looked back in shock as Chung Myung held him in place. Young master, I am asking you, what are you doing here?" Audiobook's expression contorted. I just wanted to check the condition of the young Dao." Chung Myung interrupted and continued to answer for the general. "Ah, you wanted to check my condition and kill me?" Chung Myung waved the hand he was holding. "You've misunderstood." "Misunderstood? I like misunderstandings too." Chung Myung jumped to his feet. Audiobook stared blankly at Chung Myung with wide eyes. It was clearly a serious injury." "That must have been a misunderstanding. I was fine from the beginning." You were unconscious." "Oh, I haven't been sleeping well recently, so I just happened to be overdue for a nap." Audiobook gnashed his teeth. "You deceived me." "You shouldn't say such a thing. You need to insist that it was a misunderstanding as much as possible. If you say things like that, then everyone will think you were up to something." "You!" He struck Chung Myung with his left hand. However, Chung Myung neatly avoided his attack, released his other hand, and jumped off the bed. Without looking back, he walked over to Hwang Jong-gi. "Look, didn't I tell you he would come out?" Hwang Jong-gi nodded with heavy eyes. "I didn't believe what you said, but I have nothing to say after seeing this. Of all things, I never expected the general head, whom I believed in the most, would act like this." Hwang Jong-gi shot a soul-freezing glare at Audiobook. Meeting his gaze, Audiobook knew that no excuses would work. He stared at Chung Myung with a stiff face. "How did you come to doubt me?" "I didn't." "What?" Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders. "I didn't know who the hell the wrongdoer was. You must know I've only been here for a few days. I just assumed the culprit would come to kill Master Hwang's savior if he thought I was injured and in need of recovery." "What if I hadn't come?" "You didn't have a choice." Chung Myung smiled. "It's hard to kill the first time, but the second time comes much easier. Plus, if you kill me now, you could shift the blame onto the Jungnam sect. How would you willingly miss such an opportunity?" "So you planned this with the Jungnam sect?" Chung Myung looked at him and said, "Nope." Audiobook's distorted face suddenly went blank. "You didn't?" "Yep, they just happened to pick a fight with me. I was thinking about how to solve this problem, but they came and created a nice situation." Audiobook bit his lip. "Internal wounds. I don't know about anything else, but the physician said that you were severely injured." "If I couldn't even deceive a normal physician, I wouldn't have bothered planning this thing. You keep asking such obvious questions." Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders. "You sure have a lot of questions, but I have no obligation to solve your curiosity. What's important is that you fell into the trap and I found the man who tried to kill Master Hwang." In the blink of an eye, Audiobook looked at Hwang Jong-gi. "Young master, surely you don't believe in that little child, right?" "Is there a reason for me not to believe him?" "Aren't you normally the most rational one? Isn't there something more important than what the child is saying?" "More important?" The man nodded and continued. "Yes, just because I tried to harm this child, that isn't proof that I tried to hurt the master. Why would I do such a thing? Think of how well the master had treated me all this time. Why would I bring him harm? Young master, isn't that why you never suspected me?" Hwang Jong-gi frowned at it. It was an obvious excuse, but he wasn't wrong. Then why did you try to kill the young Taoist? Why did you hide the fact that you learned martial arts? "That child was deceiving the young master. Even you were seduced by his words into thinking he could help your father. How can that child help him?" "Then you should have persuaded me." "Would you have listened to me? Wouldn't you have disregarded me? It is easier to fool a man than it is to convince them when they've been fooled. Killing that child was the only way to bring you to your senses." In an instant, there was a murmur. Hwang Jong-gi turned his head. The servants, who had gathered there after the commotion began, were whispering amongst themselves. Their words couldn't be heard, but judging from their expressions, they seemed to think that Byung-ja-bok's reasoning wasn't wrong. That was how persuasive his words were. "Are you done talking?" However, Chung Myung took a step forward. Byung-ja-bok stared at Chung Myung. "It is true that I tried to kill him, but I never tried to hurt the master. You have to—" "Ah!" Chung Myung waved his hand and cut off the ongoing speech. "Enough, enough. I don't want to hear the reason, and I don't want to hear excuses. What? I'll just have to beat him." Before anyone could react, Chung Myung rushed towards Byung-ja-bok. Aiming for Byung-ja-bok's head, he stretched out his hand. Chung Myung's hand began to emit a sharp and intense light as it rang with a shrill slicing sound. Byung-ja-bok, who could sense the power within the strike, moved to counter the assault. Kwang! Both hands crossed as Chung Myung retreated. "Now, attention please." He casually lifted his arm. That... Everyone saw the outstretched hand and doubted their eyes. The hand which had been hit clearly turned black. Then slowly, Chung Myung's entire wrist turned red. Chung Myung began to speak as the onlookers stared aghast, waiting to hear what he had to say with bated breath. "Demon hand." Chung Myung waved his hand to make sure they were all looking at him. Normal people cannot withstand a single hit, and their entire body turns red as they slowly die. Of course, this man isn't very proficient, but even at his level, he can kill people. Especially if the opponent is an old man who never once trained in martial arts. It would be even easier than eating a piece of rice cake. While Byung-ja-bok was desperately struggling to organize his thoughts and plot some way out of the situation, Chung Myung said, "Of course, if you can pinpoint another person who frequently has close contact with Master Hwang and is able to infuse him with demonic ki, then feel free to name him." A decisive blow. Anger surged in the eyes of those who witnessed these events. Who would continue to trust this man who shamelessly betrayed their master? The hand Chung Myung was showing had similar symptoms to what Master Hwang's entire body was like. You, a bastard who doesn't even appreciate the grace shown to you. How dare you try to assassinate our master and then act so shamelessly? I won't calm down even after I beat him to death." As everyone's mood changed, Hwang Jong-gi no longer hesitated. "Capture him." At his enraged voice, everyone went silent. "Right now, subdue that man. If he resists, kill him." At his command, the servants rushed into the room. Byung-ja-bok, who was tense, decided to fight. Those who entered the room were swept away by the power of Byung-ja-bok. "Damn it, it was almost over." He looked at Chung Myung with venomous disgust. "If it wasn't for that little brat." "Who are you calling a brat?" Chung Myung pursed his lips. As he was not originally little, nor a brat, he hated being called that. "A little while more and you would have been done. If I had known this would happen, I would have killed you right away. If you hadn't planted those thoughts into that stupid young master." "Ah." Chung Myung waved his hand. "Well, of course, you must have something to say. But let's talk about it later. For now, let's finish this quickly. I am a bit sleepy since I was rudely woken up from a nice nap." "What?" Byung-ja-bok exploded. "You arrogant brat. I don't know how you knew, but do you think you can defeat me with your pathetic martial arts? You? Defeat me?" "No." "Huh? Why would I bother? There are other people here to do that. There." Chung Myung pointed to someone behind him. Everyone's eyes shifted to where Chung Myung pointed. "Me?" Lee Song-baek, who was staring blankly at this perplexing situation from behind, pointed to himself. "Oh, the youngest hero had come to subdue the bad man. Please take care of yourself." "Oh, wait, me? Who else?" Chung Myung's eyes were wide open as he asked, and Lee Song-baek quickly understood the situation. Looking back, since all the disciples were dragged back to the sect, he was the only one here. Why me?" At that moment, Lee Song-baek felt it was unfair. However, Chung Myung gestured somewhere with his chin. Lee Song-baek looked and saw Hwang Jung-gi staring at him. All right, a chance to rectify his mistake. Looking back, it no longer seemed like what happened to Chung Myung was a mistake, but that didn't matter now. The enemy will be dealt by the sword of the Jongnam sect. As Lee Jong-baek drew his sword and rushed forward, Chung Myung clapped his hands and cleared the way. Wow, such heroism! He wanted to quickly take the man down, but Lee Song-baek had appeared behind him, so he offered him the opportunity. Leaving the battle between the two men, Chung Myung approached Hwang Jung-gi. One matter has been resolved. It isn't over yet. He'll capture him soon enough. He is still a famous disciple from the sect. There's no way he'll be defeated by someone who hasn't even properly mastered the martial arts. Not properly mastered. He definitely injured your hand. Chung Myung showed the hand to Hwang Jung-gi. His hand, which was black, first turned white and then red. I didn't lie. It is true that he learned the demon hand. I just exaggerated a bit to show what happens when he uses it on one person for a long time. Hwang Jung-gi let loose a deep sigh. Are you really a Taoist? Of course. The greatest and most experienced master in the world at that. Don't believe me? It's the truth. Chapter 57. The general head wouldn't last much longer. No, actually, he was lasting a lot longer than expected. Lee Song-baek, who had confidently jumped into the fight, had been fighting desperately for more than an hour to take him down. He didn't know whether it was a tense battle that made the others sweat, but it sure made Chung Myung yawn. I thought he'd take him down right away. Should I have just done it myself? However, watching Lee Song-baek sweating so profusely, Chung Myung couldn't bring himself to say it out loud. In the meantime, the tired hero was smiling triumphantly as if he was proud of himself despite taking an hour to defeat the general. Wipe off your sweat at least. The man, I took him down. Hwang Jung-gi nodded, looking at Lee Song-baek, who was trembling in exhaustion, and spoke. Seeing his trembling legs and ragged breathing, Hwang Jung-gi felt pity and couldn't stay angry at him. You've worked hard. The Eunha Merchant Guild will never forget this help. Thank you. Get some rest. Worried that Lee Song-baek would collapse, Hwang Jung-gi excused him, and he dropped down and sat without even answering. Normally, Hwang Jung-gi wouldn't have felt much gratitude for Lee Song-baek after all that occurred, but seeing his feeble appearance, which gave everything to subdue the enemy, he let himself forget the bad deed he did in the morning. Hwang Jung-gi glanced at Chung Myung. I don't know what to say about this situation. Has it really only been 2 days since Chung Myung appeared here? Yet, he solved the problem, which persisted for over a year, in just these 2 days. Was this a problem that could be solved so easily? No way. Hwang Jung-gi knew it. Everything in life seems simple in hindsight. If this was such a simple scenario from the beginning, why hadn't a single one of the world's experts been able to solve the issue? It's as if an old expert resides within that little child. But that was impossible. I think it's almost resolved now. Why did the general head target my father? I don't know. Didn't you do this because you had some guess at the reason why? No, I didn't. Hwang Jung-gi was dazed. Chung Myung calmly spoke as if he guessed what Hwang Jung-gi was thinking. It's the government's job to make him reveal the reason. My job is just to solve the problem and receive the reward. Speaking of which, you do have the reward prepared, right? Normally, no matter how hard one worked, they wouldn't so brazenly ask for compensation. Humans value their pride. However, Chung Myung didn't have any pride to take care of. At one point, he was the famous Plum Blossom Sword Saint, the best of the Mount Hua Sect. Now though, he was just the youngest of Mount Hua's third-class disciples. He didn't have a care about saving his face. Although it was a bit absurd, Hwang Jung-gi quietly nodded his head. Of course, but you forgot one thing. The problem hasn't been solved yet. I never asked you to find the assassin, but to help my father recover and get out of his bed, right? Chung Myung took a deep breath. That comes next. A more confident voice than before. Hwang Jung-gi replied in a firm voice, "I promise my support to Mount Hua, even if it means turning the guild upside down and going against the world." As if moved by the heartfelt words, Chung Myung grabbed Hwang Jung-gi's hand tightly. Hwang Jung-gi smiled brightly, as if he guessed that Chung Myung's heart was moved. "You don't need to be so moved. This is the least I can—" "Are you kidding me?" "Huh?" Chung Myung's face contorted. "The reward should go to me, not Mount Hua. Are you saying that I do all the hard work and they reap the rewards?" Hwang Jung-gi was speechless. It seemed like the child was more insane than he thought. In front of Hwang Mun-yak, lying on the bed, Chung Myung stood there with a dry mouth. Now, so long as the treatment succeeds, everything will be solved. After that, he would be able to return with his reward. Everything was handled perfectly. Nothing so far was difficult. He liked that he even got to bully the Jungnam sect in the process. That was his favorite part. But there was one problem. Honestly, I'm not entirely confident. Till now, everything was something he could do. But to be honest, it was impossible to know whether or not it was possible to fix the old man. If it was Chung Myung, the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, he wouldn't have to worry about it. No matter how ferocious the demon flower was, in the end, it was caused by demonic ki. It would be enough to simply erase all the demonic ki in the body to get back to normal. But the current Chung Myung was still lacking strength. He was very small, had little ki, and was a lot more disadvantaged. With that, there was no guarantee that he could stop the spread of the demonic ki inside Master Hwang's body. On the contrary, if he carelessly touched the demonic ki, then the weakened body of Master Hwang would die instantly. Will this work? He wouldn't know without trying. Chung Myung's stomach twisted as he approached the man. If he wasn't sure of the result, there was only one thing to do. Master Hwang would surely die if left alone. No matter how severe the sickness, wasn't it the basics of the path of Tao? One must never leave a man to die just because you lack ability. If something goes wrong, don't resent me. If it goes well for the elder, then it goes well for everyone. Chung Myung took a deep breath and placed his hand on Master Hwang's dungeon. Slowly, he pushed ki into Master Hwang's body. The ki sleeping deep within Chung Myung slowly began to flow. Chung Myung's ki was like a leisurely flowing river, sometimes a violently raging river, and sometimes a gentle sea embracing the world. However, one thing about the current Chung Myung's ki was different from his past. Crystal clear, clear and spotless. It was clear without impurities, like pure water flowing through deep mountain valleys. The clear and bright ki rushed into the body of Master Hwang, which was filled with demonic ki. Woom! Master Hwang's body slightly convulsed. The dark skin, corrupted with demonic ki, began to lighten as the vile energy retreated as Chung Myung's energy flowed in. Oh! Chung Myung found that shocking. This is interesting. He had quite a bit of experience handling demonic ki, but this was his first time seeing this phenomenon. What made this ki demonic? It was called demonic ki because it reverses the flow. Demonic ki penetrates into other people, corrodes their bodies like virulent poison, and aggressively pushes away any other ki. But now, the demonic ki in Master Hwang's body was running away like a beast on fire rather than rushing at Chung Myung's ki. Then maybe it would be possible. No. How much trouble did I have to go through to collect this? This should definitely work. If it hadn't been for Chung Myung obsessing over the purity of his ki, he would have gathered more than 10 years worth of ki already. However, the amount of internal ki filling Chung Myung's dungeon was less than a year's supply. Even this was only possible thanks to that miraculous pill. Yet somehow, this tiny amount of ki he gathered was overpowering the demonic ki gathered in the elder's body. This is something I hadn't expected. At first, he was simply trying to lay a pure and perfect foundation so that he could rise to a higher level than in the past. However, as time advanced, His obsession with pure ki grew stronger and his progress slowed. Just when he was thinking about whether he should release that obsession, when I think about it, this is only natural. Pure ki is basically the opposite of demonic ki. The pure ki contains the power to purify all unclean things in the world. This energy was basically divine when compared to demonic ki. It was the purest and most perfect form of energy. So, the demonic ki would naturally be unable to approach it. The vicious demonic ki began to neutralize in an instant. Chung Myung felt it a bit ridiculous seeing the demonic ki turn into nothingness. As he neutralized the demonic ki in Master Huang's body, he began to clear his meridians and radically purify the body. What is going on here? Cleansing the body and purifying meridians is something that would normally only be attempted with powerful medicines and only by strong warriors. How difficult would it be to purify an old man's body which had several decades of impurities and decay? But now, the young Chung Myung wasn't using any pills, but merely washing away the demonic ki in the old man's body with his own ki. The problem was that Chung Myung did not intend this result. Woom! Hwang Mun-yak's body began to tremble slightly. At the same time, his body began to turn both white and black at the same time. The area which had been purified from the demonic ki was white, while the areas which still remained tainted were dyed black. The demonic ki was desperately trying to resist little by little. Just a little more. Master Huang's body had turned into a battlefield. Even though he was unconscious, his entire body was trembling and blood dripped from his lips. Chung Myung clenched his teeth when he saw the dark red blood coming out. This was not a battle between Chung Myung and the demonic ki. This was a battle of whether or not Hwang Mun-yak could survive until the demonic ki was eradicated. I need to end this quickly. Considering Master Huang's condition, any hesitation could get him killed. It was better to leave everything to the heavens and make a quick gamble. Chung Myung, who had made up his mind, raised his ki. He pushed the last handful of ki into Hwang Mun-yak's body. Thick drops of sweat start to flow down Chung Myung's forehead like rain. In Master Huang's body, Chung Myung's ki began to heat up the demonic ki. It absorbed the ki, neutralized it, and dissolved the impurities. At the same time, Hwang Mun-yak's narrow and cramped meridians began to expand and widen. The demonic ki, which had been fiercely resisting, lost its force and began to rush to one location. Chung Myung, who saw the direction it flowed, was startled. No! The head. The demonic ki, which had no place to go, flowed into the opposite direction of the dungeon where Chung Myung was injecting ki. Master Huang's head was dyed black and started to swell like it was about to explode. Chapter 58. The demonic ki all gathered in Hwang Mun-yak's head as if it was ready to fight. I can't touch it. It was becoming a pain in the ass. If Chung Myung behaved clumsily and caused a collision in Master Huang's head, he'd be off to greet the Reaper. No, maybe now the Grim Reaper was already behind Chung Myung, patiently waiting for him to make a mistake. Then what if it was left alone? That's even worse. Master Huang's lower body was purified entirely, but that wasn't necessarily good news. The purified body would accept demonic ki from the head at a quicker rate. It would happen much like ink diffusing into clear water. If he advances, the man dies. If he retreats, the man dies too. The beleaguered Chung Myung hesitated to make a decision for a while. What do I do? Normally, he was the sort to charge forward, but what if his recklessness caused someone harm? He agonizingly pondered over his decision and then bit his lip. Then, he can't charge forward and he can't retreat either, right? Then, he'll just ignore both options. Chung Myung shifted all of his ki to one side of his body. A cornered mouse would even bite a cat, and a soldier, forced against a cliff, would fight to the death. But what if there was room to escape? The rat would run, and the soldier would retreat. Now, here's a place for you to escape. Chung Myung opened the path. There was nowhere to run away in Master Huang's body, but there was still somewhere else. There was only one place left to escape. That was to Chung Myung's own body. As soon as Chung Myung pushed his ki to one side, the pressured demonic ki began surging forth, searching for an empty vessel to occupy. The elder's body had become unsuitable. Finding the connection between the two, the ki rode along Chung Myung's arm and invaded his now empty body. Ugh! A groan leaked out. A tingling sensation rushed through his arms and spread all over the body in an instant. His eyes began to blur out with terrible pain, and his consciousness faded. Ugh! Chung Myung recovered his ki from Master Huang's body. Then, he began to spread it through his own. Ugh! There was the sound of his bones creaking and crashing down. The demonic ki, left with no place to go, began a fierce struggle. However, Chung Myung's internal ki suppressed the demonic ki like an occupying force and mercilessly cleansed it. Every part of the body seemingly turned into a battlefield. Bang! Bang! A roar echoed inside his body. With each explosion, unbearable pain tormented him. However, he bit his lip with bloody eyes. Lose consciousness here. Don't make me laugh. His pride as the Plum Blossom Sword Saint wouldn't let him. Chung Myung stood still and waited till it stopped. Chung Myung's ki attacked the remaining demonic ki, fighting until the bitter end. Quack, 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 quang. Thousands of exploding voices echoed. His vision turned white as his consciousness faded. Chung Myung closed his eyes. His ki could subdue the demonic ki, but it was strongly resisting. 1 round, 2 rounds. He scanned his body, and as if satisfied with his ability to cleanse it, his ki moved and then returned to the dungeon. Only after thoroughly checking his entire body did Chung Myung wake up. Ugh, I almost died. It was no joke. It was perilous. This demonic ki wasn't something he could have handled at his level. Even the slightest mistake would have cost either Chung Myung or Hwang Munyak their lives. It was really dangerous this time. I'm not going to do this ever again. Chung Myung gently rubbed his dungeon point, but it seems that it increased a bit. There was no particular reason it would increase, but it just felt like it had. Isn't it just still a rat tail? The ki was just the size of a small pepper. It was still a tiny fragment of what he once had, and he wasn't sure when it would grow into a large surging river. Chung Myung sighed and turned his head to look at Master Huang. His face was slightly flushed. Perhaps because the poison had disappeared, his health seemed to be recovering quickly. Right, it wasn't just the demonic ki that had been washed away. When the pure ki was pushed into him, it wasn't a body reconstruction, but the cleansing seemed like it increased his life expectancy by about 10 years. Thinking that he ended up doing good things for no reason, Chung Myung clicked his tongue and approached Master Huang. It seemed like the old man was regaining consciousness. His eyes were trembling as he slowly opened them. Master Huang's eyes, which had been shaking back and forth with no focus, began to settle on Chung Myung. Who are you? Chung Myung smiled brightly. Me? A divine Taoist. Master Huang, who was weak, trembled. I must have died and gone to hell. What the hell was that? After Master Huang regained consciousness, Eunha was quickly cleaned up. Audiobook, who tried to assassinate Hwang Munyak, had planned to kill Hwang Jonggi next if his plan succeeded. He would have then moved on to his children as well. If the entire family's bloodline died in the same manner by some incurable disease, then the public would believe it had been bad luck or a curse on the Hwang family, and Audiobook could avoid suspicion. In fact, the plan worked pretty well. If Master Huang had died suddenly, everyone would have suspected malfeasance. But since he suffered for nearly a year, no one guessed that it was an attempted murder. Didn't they even receive confirmation from the Tang family that he wasn't poisoned? If Chung Myung hadn't arrived, the Hwang family would have died according to plan, and their fortune would have been stolen. Book revealed everything. He was the son of a merchant that used to rival the Unha Guild. He spoke with tears in his eyes as he told a heart-rending tale of his pitiful life. Well, that's none of Chung Myung's business though. If you commit a crime, you should be punished. Where in the world could you find a person without some tragic experiences? The only thing Chung Myung was interested in was the demonic key. However, he said that he simply found a corpse deep in the mountains when he was journeying. Chung Myung felt like his spirit was siphoned away. Well, there was no way those demonic sect people would have been this sloppy. No, they would have handled it carefully and quietly. After all, weren't they the type that would kill others if they were bothered? In conclusion, it can be said that everything went well. The culprit was found, the elder was cured, and it was confirmed that the demonic sect wasn't involved. With that, Chung Myung, who helped the Unha Merchant Guild, was treated as their VIP, a very important guest. Master Huang sat down lightly. Father, you still need to be careful with your body. You just got out of bed. It's okay. I was indeed laid up in bed for a long time, but I feel even more energetic than before I fell ill. Still, don't worry. Hwang Jong-gi looked at his father with questionable eyes. Even so, Master Huang didn't back down. He might look like he would collapse at any moment, but he was overflowing with energy. More than that, Master Huang raised his head and looked at Chung Myung. Disciple Chung Myung, right? Yes, didn't you see me before? It seems like you've changed a lot since then. Ah, I ate quite well. Chung Myung scratched his head with thick sausage fingers. Those who saw this scene were subtly shaken. His size doubled in 3 days. How the hell did he eat so much in 3 days that his clothes are about to burst? I can even see oil flowing down his skin from the fat. Why did he even bother joining a sect? Everyone shook their heads at the sight of Chung Myung, who had grown twice as big as before in just 3 days. Master Huang was the only one who fortunately maintained his composure, as if to show how great of a merchant he was. I should greet you first. Master Huang prostrated flat on the spot. Hwang Jong-gi, startled at the sudden action, tried to lift him up, but when he saw his father's stern gaze, he backed away without a word. Master Huang bowed again and opened his mouth. Thanks to the disciple, my life was saved. I am forever indebted to you. Eh? Get up, please. Why didn't he get up? At Chung Myung's words, Hwa Munyak slowly stood up and smiled. I've heard the story from our servant. If it wasn't for you, I would have been dead. Even animals know the grace which saved them. If I was born as a human, yet forgot grace, then I would be worth even less than an animal. Oh, he's so eloquent. Right. That's right. Hwa Munyak said quietly, looking at Chung Myung. I don't believe there is any way in this world to repay this life-saving favor, but I want to do the best that I can. If my benefactor wants something, please speak without hesitation. Ah, something I want? Yes. How could a Taoist seek rewards for helping to save others? If someone were to learn about it, they would mock us. I do not discriminate against anyone. If I shirk away from showing grace simply because the one who saved me was a Taoist, I will be ridiculed. It is unacceptable for me. I understand your feelings, but it can't be helped. It would cause me trouble since I came here without getting the sect leader's permission. Without permission? Yes, it was urgent, so I didn't have time to request permission. Master Huang looked at the young Taoist in front of him with watery eyes full of affection. How could he not be moved when this child had crossed his sect gates and risked himself to travel and save him? You did that much. As I said, it was urgent. Master Huang was moved, while Hwang Jong-gi narrowed his eyes. He looks rather relaxed for someone who came here without permission, but he didn't speak in front of his father. Master Huang nodded his head and spoke with an exuberant voice. I will handle that problem for you. Furthermore, I won't tell the sect leader, so tell me what you want. Is that a promise? Master Huang tilted his head at Chung Myung, who interrupted his words. What? I want a promise that you won't tell the sect about this. Ah, of course. I'm a merchant, so I will. Again, before Master Huang could finish speaking, Chung Myung pulled out a book from his sleeve. Hwang Munyak stared at the book with a puzzled expression. What is that book? Ah, it's no big deal. I find my memory failing me and growing fuzzier as I get older. Getting older? This child? Chung Myung smiled and shook the book. I wrote it down. What? You wanted me to tell you what I wanted, right? Right. So I wrote it down. Ah, so that book? All of it. Chung Myung licked his finger, turned the page, and spoke with a smile. Now, shall we get started? Now? Hwang Munyak felt that he might have made a big mistake for the first time. Chapter 59. Father? Hwang Munyak opened the door and nodded slightly, looking at Hwang Jung-gi as he entered. Is your body all right now? It's hard to believe, but my body feels so light that I could fly away. I feel 10 years younger. That is quite strange. I'm not sure how to put it into words, but I feel as lively as I did in my youth. Hwang Jung-gi looked confused. The fact that his father, who was sick in bed for a year, had recovered was something to celebrate. However, it was strange that his sickly father's body had recovered so quickly after lying in bed for so long. Even more bizarre was that it had grown stronger and livelier with no side effects from the moment he recovered. Anyway, I am fine for now. Stop saying such things. Hwang Munyak waved his hand. That young man's ability is so amazing. It's like I have received his grace. Hwang Munyak remembered the first words Chung Myung said to him. Divine Taoist. It isn't something I misheard. If Divine Taoist was a term used to refer to those who follow the Tao and can do things that normal humans cannot, then there was nothing more fitting to call this child aside from that. Wasn't he living proof? So what is it? You probably aren't here just to check my health, are you? It might not be what you expect, but I am still your filial son. Isn't it natural for children to take care of their parents' well-being? Don't say such childish lines and get to the point. We don't have much time. Hwang Jung-gi bowed his head. Although Hwang Munyak had only recently gotten out of bed, he still had a merchant's insight. Indeed, he is my father. Discussing his concerns would resolve his worries. Father. No, Guildmaster. Do tell me, young master. By changing their titles, the conversation would no longer be bound by personal feelings between family members, but rather fellow guild members. I heard that you have issued an order to cut back on our dealings with the Jungnam sect. I did. And haven't you promised quite a bit of compensation to Mount Hua too? Yes. Father, the Jungnam sect is still a powerful sect in Shaanxi and Xi'an. It is dangerous for us to cut back our dealings with them and join hands with Mount Hua, which could collapse at any moment. Hwang Munyak nodded his head without answering. I understand that it is only natural for the guildmaster to feel grateful to the young Taoist. However, the promised reward is excessive, and it's dangerous for us to deepen our relationship with a crumbling sect. Please allow the businesses to continue as before. Hwang Munyak lifted his teacup and looked into it with deep eyes. Taking a sip of tea, he closed his eyes as if wanting to slowly savor the aroma wafting from his cup. How long was it? Hwang Munyak quietly put the cup down and opened his mouth with a slightly more serious voice than before. Young master. Yes, guildmaster. What is the duty of a merchant? That. Hwang Jung-gi thought for a bit and opened his mouth. It is a duty of a merchant to run a business that is upright and just, to make trades and contribute to the nation and the world. Hwang Munyak nodded his head with a satisfied smile. Young master. Yes, you have such a silver tongue. That sounds fine to the ears. Master, Hwang Mun-yak firmly said, a merchant's duty is to make money. Sometimes it is fine for a merchant to violate the law and even morality in order to pursue wealth. Isn't that right? Hwang Jong-gi bowed his head. Right. If you want to do the right thing, do it with the money you earned. If you want to help others, you can help them with that money. There is no rule or morality in the act of a merchant making money. There is only efficiency. Then what are we doing? With that said, wasn't Hwang Mun-yak's current choice strange? Anyone could see that he was reducing their dealings with the Jungnam sect, who was climbing to new heights while leveraging aid to Mount Hua, which was collapsing. It wasn't strange that if the Jungnam sect finds out about this, they will also cut off their relations with the guild. Did you forget how I made all this money? I do remember, but Hwang Mun-yak's method of making money was simple: to find the value of items that others ignore and distribute them, or to find and support the most undervalued products. Whether it is a sect, a union, or a group, Hwang Mun-yak had grown Eunha using that methodology, and now it was the best in Shaanxi. You mean to say that you're investing in Mount Hua this time? That's right. Guildmaster, there has been a clear reason for every investment so far, but I don't understand this move with Mount Hua. Haven't you seen it for yourself? Are you speaking about that child? Right. But Hwang Jong-gi bit his lip slightly. Chung Myung was great. There was no denying it, but only Chung Myung was good. The ability of one person doesn't lead to greatness for the entire sect, and even more so if it's a kid. With that child, I can foresee that Mount Hua will evolve. Maybe we will see them become stronger than expected. But Guildmaster, no matter how much I think about it, I don't think that one child will be able to grow Mount Hua strong enough to compete with the Jungnam sect. Doesn't this seem a bit meaningless? Hwang Mun-yak smiled brightly. Do you think so? I beg to differ. Guildmaster. Young master, merchants must always look behind the scenes and not at the picture that is shown up front. Eunha may have once been the most important alliance to the Jungnam sect, but now we are just one of their aides. How much longer do you think this will last? Hwang Jong-gi looked blankly at Hwang Mun-yak. He hadn't thought of it until now, but looking back, wasn't Kim Mok-sung's attitude too oppressive and overbearing? Even if the guildmaster was lying sick in bed, how could he dare to act so recklessly if he had any respect for the guild? The Jungnam sect has no room to grow now. Of course, they will continue to grow, but it will be at a slow pace. Though, that isn't the case for Mount Hua. Mount Hua will experience explosive growth. If we can maintain a good relationship with them, then the benefit we can reap will be unimaginably large. However, Guildmaster, I don't think there is any guarantee that Mount Hua will make it big. Hwang Mun-yak narrowed his eyes. Hwang Jong-gi. Yes, father. Their way of addressing each other changed again. You sound like a child. A merchant does not wait for a reason to move. We need to create a reason. We don't have to wait for Mount Hua to grow. We need to make it grow. If we can succeed, we will be able to leap to become one of the top 5 guilds of the land, not just of Shaanxi. That is a difficult task. If we fail, there is no going back. When the body becomes healthy, the mind becomes younger. So what if we fail? Then we'll just have to start over again. You don't want to waste the wealth we have. It is scary and unfortunate too, but I will be more ashamed if I am unable to make more money than what we have now. Hwang Jong-gi nodded his head. His father had made up his mind, so any conversation would be meaningless. I'm still skeptical. However, if my father thinks so, then I will trust and follow you. I will help Mount Hua grow so that I can clear these doubts I have. It feels good to hear that. Hwang Mun-yak chuckled, though Hwang Jong-gi's words didn't end there. But, Hwang Jong-gi frowned and asked, "Aren't the wealth and rewards you've given the young disciple a bit excessive?" "There's a reason." "Yes?" Hwang Jong-gi looked at his father suspiciously, to which his father answered with a question and a bright smile. "What do you think about that young disciple?" "Are you asking about his growth?" "Yes." Hwang Jong-gi pondered over and over and then opened his mouth. Considering his heart and determination, he will, of course, have an important position in Mount Hua in the coming future. Hwang Jong-gi spoke carefully. This wasn't something that could be said lightly. Anyway, he will play a key role. No, he is already playing a key role. Hwang Munyak shook his head and continued. "I have lived my whole life as a merchant. I have met many great merchants and warriors, but he is the only one who has embarrassed and left me in awe like this. Why should we waste our time searching for an imugi, hoping to rise when there's a dragon preparing to ascend right in front of us? There is no way we can let him go. Is he that good? You will find out soon. This sort of genius can't be understood by an ordinary person's reasoning. Don't try to understand. Just watch. There will come a time when you will end up accepting it naturally." Hwang Jong-gi nodded. He still couldn't understand, but since his father said it, he decided to accept it. But one question remained. Then why did you give such excessive rewards? He is normally the disciple of a sect, and he has his own reasons for coming here after learning that someone is sick. Of course he didn't come here solely out of sympathy for the sick, but his nature is good. There is no need to doubt that. Hwang Munyak spoke with subtle smile, different from before. The wealth and rewards he has received now will become an indelible burden on his heart. Especially as he is young, the burden will be more intense. If his feelings of gratitude become shackles that bind us together, then this is a cheap investment to make. Cheap? Actually, he took 5 times more than I expected. He was like a viper. Hwang Munyak's face flushed with irritation. No, how can someone so young want so much? Damn it, if I knew that I would be ripped off like this, I'd rather pretend to be sick and send him back. He tore me apart, that young boy. He doesn't even know to ask in moderation. Just because I asked him what he wanted, I ended up nearly crying my weary heart out. Father, calm down. Someone might overhear. Hwang Munyak pushed down his true feelings and sighed a couple of times. Anyway, if he appreciates and accepts us as close allies who live and die together, we'll have nothing to lose. I understand. A close alliance like friends. Right, of course. He's a good friend. Hwang Munyak and his son smiled at each other. Chapter 60. I caught a pushover. Chung Myung laughed softly. No, it's unreal. Aren't these people supposed to be merchants? They're really going to give me so much just because I saved one person? Money, wealth, riches. Didn't all his ancestors say that money is the best? He was already one of the wealthiest people in Shaanxi after he robbed his Sahyong's warehouse, but it was always fun to see his wealth increase. But it wasn't so much. He was just joking when he asked for half of their wealth. Just a quarter of their wealth would call for celebrations. Of course, they wouldn't have given such wealth to Chung Myung out of gratitude alone. They may have offered their entire fortune when Hwa Munyak was still ill, but the situation and rewards would naturally change once he recovered. It's common knowledge that people change their minds before and after a situation resolves. Nevertheless, to give so much wealth to Chung Myung without complaint, there must be some ulterior motive. However, even if they wanted something from Chung Myung wasn't the kind to easily comply. I just won't do it. If Chung Myung was an average child, he might feel burdened receiving so much wealth. But unfortunately for Master Hwang, he was no child. Rather, he was more like an ancient fossil from the past. If they had known, they would have taken a different approach. Anyway, everything has been resolved. He rescued Master Huang, and in return, he promised that they would help Mount Hua. He will also head to Mount Hua with Chung Myung as soon as the preparations are done. So it can be said that everything here was settled. There was just one thing left. Chung Myung smiled and looked at the person approaching. Hey, are you feeling well? Lee Song-baek, the second-class disciple of the Jongnam sect, approached Chung Myung, who was lying on the wooden floor, and stared down at him. What is it? Lee Song-baek looked at Chung Myung and then answered, I need to return to my sect soon. Ah, that's good. It must be lonely being here all by yourself. Congratulations. Thank you. Lee Song-baek didn't turn back after saying that. Seeing him standing there blankly, Chung Myung asked, Is there anything you want to say? At those words, he faintly smiled. Disciple. What? I understand that you set me up in order to solve this problem. Huh? I mean, the results were good, so I can understand what happened. Chung Myung sat up and looked at Lee Song-baek. It would be strange to call what you did a trap. Wasn't I the one who initially sought to trap you? Lee Song-baek smiled. So you aren't going to blame me? Chung Myung smiled. This kid has a strange personality. Kids these days were different from the old days. All the sects which came in contact with Chung Myung were anxious and hostile towards him. Because of that, he never bothered checking the personalities of the Jongnam sect disciples. Well, what do you want to say? It doesn't matter if I've been humiliated, put in danger, or played by you. It all happened because I was lacking. Lee Song-baek spoke with a stiff face. The only thing which bothers me is the time we crossed swords. I still don't understand what happened. Chung Myung narrowed his eyes. So? If you allow, I would like to spar with you again. This time, I have no hidden intentions like the last time, and am sincerely requesting you to spar. Chung Myung scratched his cheek. Well, look at this. He thought that this kid was going to start another fight. It was strange that he was okay with being played by Chung Myung. He thought that the kid would charge at him like a wild boar. Instead, he chose to bury his grudges and ask for a spar to understand what happened. I don't think he's just looking to get beat up. This was quite a funny reaction. What do I do? Sparring means comparing each other's skills. From Lee Song-baek's point of view, it could be meaningful to learn something from Chung Myung. But for Chung Myung, there was nothing to gain from Lee Song-baek. So, there was no reason to accept the request. Well, fine. But there was no reason to reject it either. Chung Myung stood up and pointed to the yard. Over there? Let's go where people can't see. Phew, I'm scared. Are you trying to be sneaky again? As Chung Myung pretended to slit his throat, Lee Song-baek sighed. Young disciple, I'm not a fool. It is shocking, but I know that your skills are superior to mine. Oh, Chung Myung looked at him with interest. Didn't I tell you? I want to know what happened last time. Chung Myung smiled. You're going to regret it. Even then, it is fine. Alright, well, then let's go. When Chung Myung moved, Lee Song-baek followed him with a firm expression. Lee Song-baek exhaled a low breath. He was nervous. Lee Song-baek wasn't nervous even when he became a Sahyung, nor when he fought with his fellow disciples or Sahyungs. However, looking at Chung Myung in front of him, he felt his pulse race as his heart pounded in his chest. Small. He carefully thought about it. This disciple was still a child. It was embarrassing to call Chung Myung a child, but that doesn't change that he was at least 10 years younger than Lee Song-baek. He was young enough to be the son of one of the elders. There is at least one generation gap between us. A generation gap meant the difference between a teacher and a disciple. This meant that Lee Song-baek, a second-class disciple, could take a third-class disciple under him like Chung Myung. Of course, it was difficult for him to actually take one in because he had to concentrate on his training. In other words, he was now holding his sword against someone young enough to be his disciple. But what was this? This pressure? He recognized Chung Myung as an opponent and stood against him, but an immense pressure he had never felt before weighed him down. Why am I so nervous? It was like standing against one of the elders. There was no way a child could be at that level though. In fact, not once had he felt Chung Myung trying to use his internal ki. Yet, it felt like a fierce opponent was standing on the other side. Biting his lip, Lee Song-baek tried to reignite his fighting spirit. I need to check this with my own eyes. And he looked. He seems to have good senses. Chung Myung was quite interested upon seeing Lee Song-baek, whose sword was already shaking. Right now, Chung Myung poses no threat to Lee Song-baek. However, Lee Song-baek was unable to relax, as if a mighty warrior was peering down at him. Pretty sharp senses. He might one day become the Jungnam Sect's supreme sword. In the past, when Chung Myung was that age, was there people of the same caliber in the Jungnam Sect? Well, not sure. It was a time when Chung Myung held no interest in others. He was too busy sharpening his own sword skills and trying to avoid getting caught by his Sahyungs for doing the wrong things. Even then, he couldn't think of anyone in the past that could match up. A person with great senses meant greater potential to grow. He might not stand out much right now, but as he gets older and trains more, he will begin to advance several times faster compared to the others. He could even become the Jungnam Sect's supreme sword in the distant future. But the sad thing is, he was born into the same era I was born into. Chung Myung gently raised his sword. Should he teach Lee Song-baek a lesson? Are you coming? When Chung Myung shook his head and pointed the sword at his opponent, Lee Song-baek shuddered and backed away slightly before pulling his sword forward with clenched teeth. The fact that he was still standing there showed how desperately he was trying not to back down. After taking several deep breaths, Lee Song-baek struggled to open his mouth. Can I ask you one thing before we start? Yes, anything. Who is this young disciple? I'm Chung Myung of Mount Hua. Lee Song-baek clenched his teeth. How are you so accomplished? You clearly can't have been learning the sword for a long time. I learned this sword for 100 years now, you bastard. Chung Myung hated how his age was always being used against him. He didn't like it, as in the past, Chung Myung was a lot stronger than he was currently. It has been less than a year since Chung Myung started training, and he progressed slowly as he chose to build a stronger foundation. However, he had already focused on polishing his sword for over 10 years in the past, and reached a point that no one dared to challenge him. So, there's nothing to be flustered about. The world is inherently unfair, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a chance either. The important thing is to believe in your own path, isn't it? Are you saying that if I believe in my sword and work hard, I will be able to defeat you someday? Could be. Chung Myung waved his hand. But it's fine. You won't be ashamed if you can't win against me. Rather, you will understand that it is an honor to have shared a duel with me. Weird. Too weird. Lee Song-baek's eyes sunk in. As they talked, it seemed like he gradually relaxed a bit. Be careful. I know that I'm not good enough, so I'll do the best I can from the start. Sure. Lee Song-baek slightly twisted his sword. Seeing that, Chung Myung narrowed his eyes. What is this? A small change in the sword's movement. The Jungnam Sect values precision and sharpness. There was no way they could twist a sword like this. Showing the blade and moving it in front of the opponent is mainly used in the illusion sword technique. Right, a Mount Hua sword technique. I will deal with you using the 12-movement snow flower sword. 12-movement snow flower sword? Chung Myung tilted his head. Did the Jungnam Sect have such a technique? Normally, they had the 36-movement Tansha sword. It seemed like something new had been invented in Chung Myung's absence. Here I come. Sure. Lee Song-baek screamed and rushed towards Chung Myung. Chung Myung had a gloomy look as he watched his approach. What do I do? Should he trample on the juniors of the Jungnam Sect, or teach them kindly and help them grow? No matter how bad my personality is, If the opponent was an elder or a great disciple, the situation would be different. But now, it was a child. The priority was to teach. It was then Lee Song-baek's sword changed. It wasn't fast, but heavy. Not flashy, but colorful. A change that was entirely different from the Jungnam sect's methods, which Chung Myung was familiar with until now, unfolded. Upon seeing the change, Chung Myung's face contorted like a demon in a fury. This! Chung Myung's wooden sword swung furiously. Kwang! Lee Song-baek coughed up blood and fell back in just a few seconds. However, Chung Myung wasn't satisfied, so he grabbed Lee Song-baek by the collar and pulled him close to his face. Seeing Chung Myung's demon-like visage, Lee Song-baek struggled to breathe. You! Where did you learn that technique? You... Chung Myung bit his lip. 12-movement snowflower sword technique. What bullshit. Those words may deceive those who don't know any better, but Chung Myung wouldn't be deceived. The change was dull and clumsy, but the basic form of the sword was something Chung Myung knew very well. Plum Blossom, the sword of Mount Hua, a sword representing Mount Hua, a sword that was the essence of Mount Hua. The 24-movement Plum Blossom Sword technique, which was lost in Mount Hua, now was unfolded in the hands of Lee Song-baek.